All right, we're back at the 2013 KOTESOL International Conference with someone who was with us at the 1999 PAC2 conference 14 years ago. And we were just talking behind the camera about a recording from that conference that he uses in his teaching. So first, can you tell us who you are and what you're doing here?
Yes, I'm Todd Terhune, and I've been in Korea about 18 years, and this is I've been a member of KOTESOL since 1994, and I taught at Jeonbuk University and Hannam University, and now Yeongnam University in Daegu. And I was here in 1999, and there was and Jeff is still doing what he did.
But I've come a long way. We have a whole room now. Back then we were in like this little closet for chair storage, so we're moving up in the world.
Right. Well, as I mentioned to you before, I've used one of your podcasts from 1999, and when you interviewed Brandon, and I scripted it, and now I use it in class for discourse analysis and to show students what a real conversation between two native speakers is like, complete with all of its idiosyncrasies and even grammar mistakes. So in discourse analysis, we look at the slang, individual pause words, and I also point out that you asked Brandon a couple of typical interview questions. What do you do in Korea? Tell me about yourself. Tell me about what you're doing. And his replies are also rehearsed and polished. And then when you asked him, how long have you been a geek? Which is a surprising question. You can see in his response that even native speakers struggle with questions that they've never thought about before, never been asked, and they'll need extra time to compose a coherent response. And so this is very comforting to my second language students to realize that even native speakers struggle with these new questions.
So I'm going to try to phrase my question very carefully. I hate to be an example of another grammar error, but can you tell me, first of all, is this course a discourse course, or is it part of a larger course? And what do you do with it? You play the conversation, you point out these features. Anything beyond that?
It's not a special course. I use it whenever I can, particularly in advanced pronunciation. It helps the students to recognize features of normal discourse, from pause words to generational vocabulary, to the idiosyncrasies of individual speakers, and the fact that native speakers don't always get it perfect, and dealing with new and difficult topics. It's okay to take extra time for thinking, and it's okay to have a bunch of extra pause words, and it's okay because here, see, these two native speakers did it. So.
Do you do this with other conversations? What kinds of things do you look for in material that you use for this?
Mainly just normal conversation between two native speakers. Anything, if I can find a recorded conversation between two native speakers in ordinary setting or ordinary situations. That's what I'm looking for.
Do you turn them onto any websites like ELLLO.org, English Language Listening Laboratory? They've got thousands of conversations, not just between native speakers, but some non-native speakers also. And as I was thinking about that question, I thought, well, is a conversation different if you know you're recording it for a language learning site? Even though, okay, we're going to have a natural sounding conversation, but does something change? And then I was thinking, as opposed to a natural conversation like this, but then we also know that we're being recorded, and if we were just in a bar having beer, we might discourse differently as well.
Well, I don't know about you, but in this situation, I totally am not aware. I'm not overly conscious of camera or microphone at this moment. And the websites that you mentioned, I think those are good if you can find them, but the most important thing, in my opinion, is to have a script, to have it scripted, and particularly in discourse analysis type scripts, it details the pause with dots, and it has slang and false starts scripted out. For example, if I said, "What are you trying to do?" I would have all three of those beginnings, and then dot dot dot, and then a second false beginning, and then again finally the sentence, and showing those features of a real life normal conversation is very eye-opening, because in all the textbooks, in all the commercially published materials, none of that appears.
Interesting. Maybe a market niche that can be tapped into. So what else are you interested in these days?
I'm interested in gardening and woodworking.
Gardening? What kind of gardening do you do here?
Just herbs and vegetables.
Is it like a sunroom garden or
Rooftop.
rooftop?
Yes.
Very cool. All right. Anything else you want to talk about or share? Any questions from our audience? We have a live studio audience with a very full mouth at this time. We'll get back to the audience.
Yeah.
All right, Todd. Well, thank you very much, man. That was I love hearing about that. Is the lesson materials for that are not online, are they?
No.
Okay. I've got them in an email. I'm going to revisit them. Very cool stuff, and I aspire someday to become part of your curriculum again.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if you caught the beginning.
No, I did have a question, but you may have probably
Back on the air, we have a question from the audience. What is your question, sir?
I finished eating my muffin. Do you record your own sort of realia, your own, like, do you try to capture authentic conversations between native speakers?
I haven't, which is why I used the one I gleaned from the '99 conference, because it felt like a real conversation between two native speakers, the Jeff and Brandon interview. Yes, it was an interview, but like I said, I think the consciousness of being recorded was lessened as the interview wore on, and you can feel that in the interchange between both of them. So it seems real enough, and frankly, to make the points that I'm trying to make through the use of this material, I only need a few samples. These are available, actually, and it's not hard to get them, particularly without scripts. And then if you can find one and script it yourself, and make sure that you include all of those pauses and false starts and use of slang. And one of the interesting features of this sample is that Jeff and Brandon were about 5 to 10 years age difference, and you can hear it in the way they talk. And that's another feature I point out to my students.
With the false starts and those types of things, and the repetition, the normal features of rehearsed speech, what things are you pointing out to your students with those types of features?
Personalized slang and pause words, generational slang.
Do you remember any of my personalized slang?
Not yours, but Brandon's. Brandon was much younger. Much is a relative term, but you were.
He was a whippersnapper.
You were young yourself, but I think we're about the same age, aren't we? So we're still young.
Still young.
That's right. He used his favorite pause word was basically, and he used that an inordinate amount of times, and you never did. Jeff never did, but Brandon used basically a lot. And then when he got flustered with unexpected questions, like how long have you been a geek? Then he lapsed into generational slang, like I can't recall. Maybe it'll come back to me, but he did. He used some things that younger people use in college students would say, and that Jeff never said during the whole interview. Other things like the closing. There was, the features of discourse in. There's a pre-closing, and then there's a closing and a salutation like this. You can't just end. There's several stages of closing. You signal that you're ready to end. And in this particular interview, Jeff signaled by saying something like, "Well, it's certainly interesting, and we'll be looking forward to blah, blah, blah." And then Brandon wasn't ready to finish, and so he didn't take the cue. And he brought up another issue, which he just seemed to pop into his head. And then after that was dealt with, then you tried almost the same pre-closing again, but this time he took up the cue and he replied in an appropriate acceptance manner, and then there were several stages of, well, good luck to you, thank you, you too, goodbye. It's like several steps to closing a conversation, which you can find in the ProLinguist series on conversation strategies. It's a green book, it used to be green, or discussion strategies as well, as both by ProLingua. Just they highlight these types of things like rejoinders, and how to end, how to finish a conversation. But my master's in TESOL was a long time ago at Michigan State, and one of the grandmothers of discourse analysis was my professor, and so I've been interested in discourse analysis for a long time. So.
How do you find your students responding to this? And what are they hungry for? What do they want to do with this information? Is there any, like I was saying, you point things out. Is there any sort of practice part of the lesson?
Yes, I have them shadow the speakers in the sample, particularly certain parts I'll say are worth emulating. Not everything is, but the realization that comes to them when I show this sample is one of relief, one of enjoyment, one of surprise, because it feels like I'm the only one out there pointing this stuff out. Like, it's not in any of these textbooks, and so it's yeah, it is a niche area.
And that was an audio-only recording, right?
That's right.
Because then there's the whole nonverbal component of discourse as well, which
True.
we can use this video for. All right. Well, it's been an interesting conversation. We look forward to one more. All right, man, very interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, one of the signals I'm using in this conversation is which is a signal that I finished and I'm handing it over to you now. It's sort of a turn-taking signal.
You also have a really nice pace of speaking. I wish I could remember to speak at that pace. I think my students would appreciate that. No.
You tend to finish a thought and shut out.
It's like your brain is ahead of your mouth, and you're just like, my mouth gets too far ahead of my brain, and who knows what comes out.
But false starts are a natural part of discourse, and it's nothing to be afraid of.
For the first time I saw my own speech transcribed, I occasionally interviewed people for my blog, and the first time I saw my own speech transcribed, I was horrified. I was like, I actually speak like that? Oh my God. There was not one grammatical sentence in 10, maybe, or maybe one. You know.
Which is another reason why it's not being taught, because very few teachers are aware of their own speaking style. And if they knew it, they might be able to explain it better. Another feature that I like to point out is speaking in thought groups. Each thought group is spoken rapidly, usually, punctuated by thinking time between groups.
What do you mean by thought group? Is it like a particular idea that's expressed?
Yes. Usually a phrase is a thought. So if I use the example of the 1991 recording, where Jeff says, in his introduction, he says, "This is Jeff Lebow at the Pan-Asian TESOL Conference in Seoul, Korea, and we are talking with Brandon Miller, who is one of the co-founders of expat.org, a new website here in Korea." That's pretty much how it's said. I might be exaggerating,
Sounds familiar.
but it's each thought is rapid with and next thought and next thought and next thought. And this is how native speakers usually talk. We have these, we pause and we think, usually with stretching a word or adding a pause word. And then once that thought is formed, it just pours right out pretty quickly. But then we have another pause. So that's a fairly natural style of speaking and saying stuff.